Welcome to the Andy Staples Show. It is a day that we would usually just be breaking down the draft by conference and by team, and we will get to that. But this is going to be one of the more interesting Mays in college football history. And I couldn't think of anybody better than the Portal Authority himself, Max Olson, to come on as we record this. Today is the day, we're recording it on Sunday afternoon, that you must be in the transfer portal if you want to play somewhere else next season. So there may be some news after we finish recording. You may hear me time travel and hear something before this where I said, so-and-so jumped into the portal and so did so-and-so. But
you may hear me just go like, oh my God, in the middle of this. We'll see.
Exactly. Because Max has his finger on the pulse of the portal. And Jordan Addison is a guy that we're watching the closest, obviously. Pittsburgh wide receiver, won the Biletnikoff Award last year. And as of Friday night, it appeared that he may be on the move. And somebody took a picture of him, and was at McCarran Airport in Vegas at the baggage claim. So
look like
I think he's going to UNLV, but USC was the rumored landing spot according to our Bruce Feldman. And Max, this is sort of what everybody. Well, some people feared it. I think we just kind of expected it. I don't know if fear would have been the right word.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But when the transfer rules changed and when we figured out what these NIL collectives would be and what they were doing, this was a definite possibility. And here we are.
Yeah, I saw a lot of crying going on Twitter on Saturday morning. I was out running errands with the family, so I kind of missed most of it.
My favorite was Matt Berry, right? Matt Berry, noted Arizona State fan.
Yeah.
Talks about everybody screaming about this and it ruining the sport because Arizona State lost a player.
Yeah. Well, and the Arizona State one, I honestly, like, how do I put this? Like, I think there's going to be some people that say, man, we're only losing players because of NIL. And in some cases, that's true. And in some cases, you're probably like in a little bit of a denial about the culture problem you might have at Arizona State or something.
Why would anyone want to leave Arizona State? I mean, it's not like they're shedding coaches like a snake sheds its skin.
Right. Yeah.
It's not like their president and AD have come out with bass-ackward views on NIL.
Correct. Yeah. And they've got some clouds hanging overhead there a little bit. So I want to ask you, what was your, beyond the initial shock, what was your, on Friday night or whenever, what was your like initial gut take on Jordan Addison potentially? Well, we can say potentially going in the portal. The USC part is sort of a separate part of this.
Yeah, the USC part's a separate entity from this. And the question is, how many people knew Jordan Addison was potentially on the move? I mean, the big question here is the tampering thing. And that's the rumor that we heard was that the Pitt coaches believe it's tampering. And now, look,
it sounds like they communicated that concern to Lincoln Riley as well.
Yeah. I'm not gonna accuse anybody of tampering here directly, because this is part of the problem. Actually, let's start with this part. The tampering rules in the NCAA rule book, they're a level 2 violation. That's not the worst. Level 1's the worst. Mm-hmm. It's not a severe punishment for them. I would think personally, if I were the schools and I was looking at this new system and how it was working, I would make tampering like the worst thing you could do.
Yeah.
You can do that. Like, nobody's going to get mad at you punishing a millionaire coach for breaking a rule.
Right. This is a question I've been asking for years, Andy, and even at, like AFCA, and you asked Todd Berry and some of those folks, like, are there, is this an issue you guys care about as coaches? And I think, from talking to them, it's hard to get them on the record about tampering because
they all tamper.
On one hand, they want to say, let me tell you what's wrong with tampering. On the other hand, they want to reserve the right to tamper. So they don't want to be the guy who's a hypocrite. And there's some, it's like insider trading, right? Sometimes you get information you shouldn't have, and you have to make that decision of, do you want to talk to that kid or whatever? But I mean, I just had this yesterday from recruiting coordinator hit me up and said, hey, this guy went in the portal. We think this school tampered with him. I've heard this many times over this portal cycle. And I think the thing I wonder with that, first of all, there's not like there's no fear out there, right? Because there's really not precedent to say, Oh man, remember when this school got really
They
hammered for
never
tampering?
get anybody for tampering.
No.
And let's be clear, tampering has been going on long before even the
Before
transfer
NIL.
rules.
I mean, come on. Yeah, of course.
Back when you had to sit out a year, when everybody had to sit out a year for transferring if you hadn't graduated, there was still tampering going. Like, let's say you're a school, you're a college in a state that produces a ton of players, and a player from your state leaves the state, goes somewhere else. If he's not starting immediately as a freshman, you're on his parents and on his high school coach. Like, hey,
yep.
Does he want to come home?
Yep.
Well,
and assistant coaches move around the country so much now that they're going to stay in touch with these families of guys they recruited and maybe only coached for a year and stuff like that. So those guys are going to kind of stay in your DMs and say, are you happy there? They're not playing you very much over there. And that kind of stuff. But
your girlfriend goes to school 5 miles away.
That's right.
You want me to go check in and say hi?
There's no fear of it. And what can you do? Like, you're right. You can up the penalty on it. You can make an example of somebody. I think that there's also the problem of, I've heard a lot of cases of like, oh yeah, we heard, we've got this guy dead to rights. Well, do you have evidence? Well, no, we don't have a screenshot or something like that. And the burden of proof on that is, I think, pretty tough from the NCAA
You can have
level.
A player run your communication and they're not going to punish a player for that.
Right.
So, I mean, it's pretty easy to run your communication through a player if you're going to tamper with somebody.
To you, like if you say, I've seen people put this out there that, okay, well, if Caleb Williams is recruiting Jordan Addison, then there's no harm done there. To me, I guess my take on that would be like, well, he's not going
orders?
Rogue here, right? Like, he's probably
right.
going at the direction of the
here's
coach, and Lincoln Riley's not going to give him a slap on the wrist for that.
Yeah, well, and back in the old NCAA, when they would make plea deals, essentially, like bring Leo Lewis from Mississippi State and tell us what Ole Miss gave you. You get to keep all your eligibility. You can dump all the stuff on them, but just tell us. Like,
yeah,
you're going to do that to make the player dime out his own coach? Like, I don't think that's going to work either. So, it's a weird situation, which we knew was coming. Now, the Jordan Addison thing, I've been thinking about this since it happened because this really sucks if you're Pitt. It really sucks. You had this great player. He had an incredible season, and you would hope that he can be one of your leaders this year. You just won the ACC. Like, you are riding high. Pat Narduzzi's signed an extension. He's staying. But you also lost your OC. You lost your receivers coach. Your quarterback's done. Now you got a new quarterback in Keaton Slovis, but you don't know that he's Kenny Pickett. So if you're Jordan Addison, why wouldn't you look around if you could?
Yeah, beyond the obvious like incentives here, do you think if you're Jordan Addison, you look at this and say, okay, I had a hell of a year. People are telling me I'm a first round pick, probably going to be a first round pick. Is it the question more of what do I have to do to ensure that I am, or what do I have to do to sort of, is there a move I can make here that moves me up 10 spots or something if I go to the right place?
Can I bring out another name that you and I exchanged in text messages that might make this make more sense?
Okay, go ahead.
I texted you after the draft ended on Saturday and said, if I had told you after that last Alabama-Clemson national title game, the one in Santa Clara, that Justin Ross would go undrafted, how quickly would you have called the cops to have me put in a psychiatric hold? Like,
no question. I would have said, Andy, that's a very strange thing to say about a kid that was a freshman and just won the
dominated Alabama in the national title game. Dominated them. You
never know, man. You never know.
He had a neck injury. So, I get why he went undrafted. Like, the NFL, if you're going to be careful about an injury, a pre-existing neck injury, you're going to be really careful about. That's going to scare a lot of teams away. So I get why he went undrafted.
Yeah.
But if you're Jordan Addison,
I would take 5 years of Justin Ross over 10 years of other guys.
Exactly.
That's just me.
But if you're Jordan Addison, and you just had this great year, that feels like a nothing is guaranteed kind of moment to me.
Yeah.
And if you can cash in this year right now, why wouldn't you?
For sure. And there's no, you think back to a year ago, and we, look at where Sam Howell ended up. Look at where Matt Corral ended up. Even just the guys you talk about it in December, you say, hey, these guys are looking like first round picks, or they had that potential, and that's just not how the process shakes out. It's very unpredictable, and one little thing can kind of go wrong. So I think that's a fair point. There was a tweet by you alluded to him, Brendan Marion, the receivers coach at Pitt, who's now at Texas. He posted this right before we started taping, and I think it's a good point. And look, you can say, oh, he's just tweeting this because he wants Jordan Addison's attention and wants him to come to Texas. I'm sure he probably does, but he said he wrote this on Twitter. Many may never understand how it feels to be the best and want to be compensated as such and be challenged to be even better. And that's probably the case for Jordan Addison. I can't blame him for saying, I'm the best receiver in the country, and we're in a time right now where the best receiver in the country has got to be worth quite a bit.
Yeah, absolutely. And especially in a time when receivers are worth quite a bit. There are really good receivers everywhere, game-changing. The game is changing in a way, especially at the NFL level, where receivers become so valuable. And you're watching, like you just watched A.J. Brown get paid. Hollywood Brown's going to go get paid now that he's been traded to the Cardinals from the Ravens. Like those people got traded because the teams they were on didn't want to pay up, but knew someone else would.
Right.
So yes, you absolutely want to maximize your value. Now, is going to USC maximizing his value? Is going to Texas maximizing his value? Is going to Alabama maximizing? If you want to maximize your value, I would think Ohio State or Alabama would be the play. Well, do you want to go into that crowded receiver room at Ohio State? No, of course not. But
it's funny because USC's already taken 3 receivers out of the portal this offseason. So if you're one of those guys, you're like, wait a minute, I thought I was going to get the ball.
Or what about Miami? They got a quarterback in Tyler Van Dyke, and they've got it. The John Ruiz thing is amazing to me. John Ruiz, for those who don't know, is a businessman. He's I believe an attorney in South Florida. He's created this company called Life Wallet. And he basically is paying Miami athletes to endorse Life Wallet. It's actually the straightest on NIL deal.
Yeah.
Like the least convoluted NIL deal there is, but it's clear what it is.
Yep.
And
they even announced contract terms with the
Nigel
K-State basketball transfer.
Exactly. Well, and so if you listen to Friday's show, David Ubbin and I went deep on that because it hasn't really happened in football. You had the Jarvis Brownlee situation at Florida State where he held out of spring practice, wanted a better deal, wound up transferring to Louisville. But the Nigel Pack thing and Isaiah Wong thing was the most public version of this, where Isaiah Wong's agent basically says he's leaving unless he gets a better NIL deal. He wound up staying. John Ruiz tweeted, "We're not changing his Life Wallet deal, but I'm going to get him some more deals." So basically he got more money. It worked.
Yeah.
He did not enter the portal. But John Ruiz is not shy about this. Like he is saying, I am going to go get you. I'll give you a deal with Life Wallet right now. And Miami has a quarterback. And I don't believe the ACC has a rule like the SEC. The SEC has a rule that said if you weren't in the portal by February 1st, you can't play in another SEC school this year.
Right.
The ACC doesn't have that rule. So
that's a good point.
Same division too.
Yeah, that might be a little uncomfortable, but at the same time, like this is different than Nico or kids in this 23 class. Like this is a guy who has to be. This is straight up a business decision for.
Well, and
for
here's
Madison.
The thing:
you can't go to a place where you're like. I pointed out the other night, like this guy got 144 targets last season and caught 100 balls. Like he's going to want to go to a place that can have that kind of an impact because he's trying to make it to the league.
Well, if I were an NIL collective. Forget recruits. This is the guy you pay.
Yeah.
Like this is who you back the truck up for. You know he's good.
For sure. And I was thinking about this, Andy. Like I understand why this is upsetting to Pat Narduzzi and their coaches and to the fan base. And there's almost a part of this where like at this time a year ago, Jamison Williams was leaving Ohio State. And even that was like controversial, especially with where he ended up. But even the fan base could be like, well, that's okay.
Talented there,
right? Like there's like some guy. I think for a lot of people, it's like certain guys it's acceptable if they leave, and certain guys it's just not acceptable if they leave. And Jordan Addison is one of them. But we probably should have seen this coming. I mean, I think you could look at another one there. You can look at Jahmyr Gibbs going to Alabama, and this is probably one of those that should have warned us that this is kind of where this could go. We've talked about that Alabama's not going to have holes in the lineup anymore, obviously, right? But if you're the best players in the country, and obviously Pitt had a hell of a year last year and could have a hell of a year this year. I'm not comparing Pitt to Georgia Tech, but I think you have to understand the best players in the country. We may just be heading in this direction where when you hit the end of the season, you have a real conversation about, yep, we're doing well here. Is this the best place I can be?
It's very international soccer. Like, as soon as you prove you're good at a lower level, like, you are going to get bought by Manchester United. Like, that's just how it's going to go, or Man City or Chelsea or whoever has the biggest checkbook at the moment. I think Chelsea's being sold right now, so maybe not them. But the Jahmyr Gibbs thing's different than the Jordan Addison thing, though, because Jahmyr Gibbs could have gone to Alabama in high school and just chose not to.
Yeah.
And so he was rectifying that mistake.
True.
Like, Jordan Addison, that was not an option for him.
Yep.
He played his way into this option.
It's a fair point. It's a fair point. I mean, I just think that I don't know. I wonder how much, like, a year from now, do you think this is going to change the way we talk about things? Where at the end of the season, is this going to be a little bit like basketball and mid-majors where you're like, man, this guy really blew up. He's probably going to go in the portal and see what's out there.
Who's taking him now? I do.
Not to say Pitt's a mid-major, but, you know, I mean, in terms of the top talent in the sport, maybe things will go in this direction where guys will at least put their name in there to be able to have these conversations.
And the thing is, like, the group of 5 coaches, I feel like, expect it. Like, they're accepting of it. If you're at Coastal, if you're at Miami of Ohio, if you're, you know, at those schools, like, you kind of expect that if you have a guy blow up, they're going to get either poached or attempted to be poached by one of these Power 5 schools. If you're Pitt, Backyard Brawl is actually taking, I would say, taking the brunt of this, because West Virginia has gotten a situation where it feels like every time a player proves he's pretty good at West Virginia, like, somebody swoops in.
Right.
And
right.
that's
recently. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's gotta suck, because those fans don't.
Nobody likes being a feeder in this. Yeah. And that's where
they don't view their teams as second division schools. Like, Pitt won the ACC last year.
Yeah. Almost won a New Year's Six Bowl.
Yep.
It's frustrating, and I recognize too that the answer to this is also not to just, like, shout at Pitt, well, pay him money. You know what I mean? Like, it's not. We have to find different ways to talk about this collectives thing than just saying, like, hey, school that's losing this guy, like, stop being poor. You know,
that is a solution. You know what another solution is? Don't lose Mark Whipple to Nebraska.
Well, like, that was that was his choice, but yeah, I know what you mean.
Yeah, no, but it's always the choice when the assistant leaves. But why did Brent Venables stay at Clemson so long? Because Clemson kept paying him. Like, they kept paying him more. So I know I've said this before on the podcast, and I know people hate it when I say it, but there are a lot of problems money can't solve. Love, satisfaction, pure, true joy and happiness. But there's a hell of a lot more problems that money can solve. Coordinator leaving, best receiver leaving. You can solve both of those with money, but you didn't.
Well, you know, but shouldn't we keep that same energy though? If you're upset, I mean, what Whipple and Brennan Marion did is it that different than what Jordan Addison could do?
Nope, not one bit. And that's why I'm not upset about it. And so, like, you know, everybody talks about, well, you all screamed about all this, but you didn't have a plan. No. We said all along, come up with a better plan. Give them more all along. Give them a little. Give them some here. And the schools in the NCAA said, no, we're not going to. We're going to dig our heels in. Well, pigs get fat and hogs get slaughtered. You got slaughtered. And now here you are. So you have to figure something else out. And we just gave you a solution at the top of the show, a potential solution, if the schools and the NCAA actually wanted to do it. And that would be change the severity of the tampering rule. Take tampering from, you know, petty larceny to capital murder.
To show cause. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. And you do that, then maybe it would have, well, and you actually have to enforce it, and you actually have to enforce it in less than 4 or 5 years. But, and that's where we're at here, Max, because every time I get to that point where I go, well, they could change the rule and then they could enforce it, but they'd have to enforce it more quickly than they do. Like, okay, they have to overhaul everything. They just do. They cannot continue to go on the way they've gone on. And I agree. See, everybody thinks because I wanted all this to happen with the players getting paid and all that, that I want it to be a completely unfettered system. You got to have some sort of structure.
Right.
But you got to make a structure that will not get you dragged into federal court. And it may be time to figure out what that structure is.
We may look back on this period of time, however long it lasts, and be like, man, that was pretty wild when there were rules. The thing we can't sit here today and say is when's this going to end?
No. And here's the other part of it. Is it bad for the sport? Because
I was going to ask you that.
So it's bad if you're Pitt, and it's really bad if you're West Virginia, and if you're, I'll say Arizona State too, even though Matt Berry, the reason your team is shedding players is not entirely because of NIL. It's because the people in charge are not very good at what they're doing. But those schools are going to suffer. But I am wondering, is there more of a spreading out of talent that's happening? Because I wrote that Texas A&M story last week, and everybody's super mad about it still. And then you had the Florida guy saying that he's funding he's going to fund the NIL, and his fellow high value Gators are going to fund the NIL. Like those are two schools that have not made the playoff, have not competed for national titles in A&M, not in a long, long time. But wasn't the complaint that it's the same 3-4 schools? Now it might not be the same 3-4 schools, and it feels like everybody's complaining about that.
Yeah, I don't know. I've had conversations with staffers at schools that are not going to be in this big race here, and I think that I find that part interesting too. I know that's not quite as sexy to talk about, like what's everybody else supposed to do, but this is kind of the problem.
It's a legit question.
This is the problem that I think everyone is sort of having to grapple with, and there's, as you're seeing right now, there's lots of people saying, well, we're not really sure we want to get in the collective game, but we got to have something. We got to be able to tell kids we have something, and we're got to be able to do something.
Here's my thing.
I think I don't know how this all shakes out in terms of how many schools want to, play the life wallet game, and how many schools want to say, well, we're going to have kind of a little operation here that takes care of our people, but is not going to be able to take guys away from Pitt for 7 figures.
Well, here's the deal. Haven't all these schools been doing business and paying coaches lots of money and charging people for tickets and getting television money? Most of them with no aspirations of actually winning the national title?
Correct. Yeah.
Why not just keep doing that?
This does clarify that a tiny bit in terms of the haves and have-nots, and also who truly wants to go. But I'm not saying anyone would be wrong for, you know what I mean? Like, I think it's easy to say, like,
I don't have a problem. I actually think schools should just be what they are.
Exactly.
Like, it bothers me when a school goes from FCS to FBS or tries to jump FBS conferences and say, well, here's what our athletics budget is. And their athletics budget comes from charging every student $16 a credit hour when none of those students care about athletics. Mm-hmm. And so you're just fleecing them.
Yeah.
You're robbing them essentially. Or you're hitting them with a hidden cost that they don't know about and aren't even thinking about, and using that for your own personal benefit. So I don't have a problem if a school's like, you know what, maybe we don't want to compete at this level.
Well, but I think there's different ways to look at that, though. I think that I'm interested to see as we get more of these collectives or nonprofits or however you want to set it up together at these schools. I know that the sexy thing is, can you go out and sign the best 2023 recruits in the country right now? Certainly, there's a lot of bidding wars and things going on there, but don't you think that, and this goes back to Addison, don't you think that there are probably going to be some programs out there that understand we should be in the retention game here? We should be taking care of who we got.
Well,
and guys, when a Jordan Addison breaks out, let's give him reasons to not leave.
Yeah, this is what we're talking about with Dave Aranda last week. This is what Brock Purdy was talking about with Matt Campbell. Mm-hmm. Like, certain coaches are going to be better at that. I think Shane Beamer at South Carolina might be pretty good at that. Like, there are going to be coaches that their style will make it where a guy likes play. And listen, there are a lot of people who will just go for the money and just go for the highest dollar amount they can. But that's not everybody.
No.
Sometimes if there's some money and you're happy, you might be okay with that.
I want to believe, maybe I'm just being totally naive here, but I want to believe at a lot of places you can still hold on to guys through great, genuine relationships and some money and taking care of them and doing some of
Right.
those things for them. But I want to believe that you can still achieve that. And I'm not saying Jordan Addison didn't have those or that he's a bad guy for chasing this at all. I would like to, I hope we can live in a world in which, the coaches get it and do enough so that those kind of players, aren't tempted.
Yeah. And we'll see what happens here. Now, I will say with USC, you did mention they've taken quite a few receivers out of the portal. If Jordan Addison ends up at USC, that's obviously another great weapon for them.
Mhm.
But shouldn't somebody tap Lincoln Riley on the shoulder and be like, if you're going to do this with these guys, like, how about a lineman or two?
Yeah.
Have you not watched the tape of USC over the last few years? Like, good receivers and decent quarterback play ain't your problem.
You often hear these coaches, it's very cliche to be like, oh, I didn't watch the tape from last year. I want to give these guys a clean slate, fresh start, all that. Probably should watch the tape from last year at USC and figure out what are we bad at here.
Yeah, why are you not trying to poach the best offensive lineman from the schools like Pitt or the schools like West Virginia or wherever you want to poach, K-State, I don't know, whoever you want to poach from. Like,
if you're the GM of a program, Andy, I'm guessing you would be paying handsomely.
This feels like Matt Millen,
O-line, D-line.
which was always weird for me when Matt Millen would just continue taking receivers when he was the GM of the Lions. Because Matt Millen was a lineman and understood how important line play was. So it is very strange to me. But yes, I do think maybe somebody needs to read my my study of bust rates and whatnot. Well, that was 5-star recruits. This is transfers. You don't really need to worry about bust rates. Like, they're good.
You would at your school, you would set up the Hog Molly Fund or something like that.
Yeah.
And your guys would be well fed and well compensated for 3 to 4 years.
I will say this though, Max. I actually think offensive linemen as a personality trait group might be more loyal.
Could be.
Your entire job is to protect anonymously.
Yeah.
That person may not be as easy to pry away as someone who basically their job is to be a diva.
Well, and the draft bears us out and recruiting bears us out. Bruce wrote a great piece about this a couple of years ago, but man, it is really hard to hit on offensive line evaluations. And so that's where I think if I were throwing around NIL money on portal guys, yeah, you would want, if you can go find experienced guys, doesn't mean they're necessarily the top level talent you want in your conference, but if you can find experienced guys, those are extremely coveted. We saw obviously O'Shawn Mathis going to Nebraska this weekend is a big one in terms of one of the top players in the portal. But those O-line and D-line guys that are legit. And there's another one that just went in this weekend, Jermaine Lole from Arizona State again. I think he will probably replace. He'll probably be number 2 on my best available list here behind Jordan Addison whenever Jordan Addison decides to go in the portal,
which is not yet.
Not yet, still. Nope.
With the information that we received while recording the podcast. So maybe it will have happened by the time you hear this podcast, but not yet. Max, you mentioned this the other day in our Slack group chat. Can you explain to dear listeners how this process will work in terms of when these names might actually get into the portal and because the deadline is Sunday, May 1st. To be in the portal or to have requested to be in the portal, but we won't hear about all of them immediately, right?
Yeah, so just the basic way to sum it up is that the May 1 deadline is that a player's got to put it in writing to basically the compliance department at their school that, hey, please put my name in the transfer portal. From that point in time, the compliance folks, they have up to 48 hours to go put you in there. So we may still see some names pop up here. May 2nd, May 3rd, potentially that go in. Now those players will probably tweet it before then, I would think, but I wouldn't say if as you go to bed Sunday night, if a guy's not in the portal, I wouldn't necessarily say you're sleeping easy as a fan because there may still be some that pop up these next couple of days. But we're in an interesting time here too with this, Andy, because the supply and demand's a little off. There's there's schools that are definitely saving room, and you've heard Lincoln Riley and others say it, that they're looking to add more guys or more bodies or whatever this summer. And I would say, honestly, over the last 3 weeks, the names that are popping up in the portal, with kind of few exceptions, it's a lot of those players that are kind of getting purged off your roster. You know, that they're having the exit meeting with the coach, and the coach is telling them, look, you're probably not going to play here. These are guys that just don't have much playing time over the past couple of years. So there's a lot of players out there. Like, you're kind of having to turn over rocks here a little bit in terms of finding some guys. And I've heard from a couple people like, oh, we've got this need at like tight end. It's like, yeah, a lot of people do. There's not guys out there. Yeah.
So I was at Florida spring game. Their clear needs right now are linebacker and receiver. Mm-hmm. It doesn't sound like they're in on Addison, but who knows? Hugh Hathcock, the name of the guy who the donor who was funding the big fund, who if he gets into springs in action, maybe they got a shot, but it doesn't sound like they do.
But I think there's the players going in right now are probably gonna have some pretty good opportunities because there's still a lot of spots out there. There's just not a lot of, Addison's a big name certainly, but there's not necessarily a ton of these like all conference studs that are in the portal available right now. And maybe that'll change in the next 48 hours, but there's going to be a lot of competition over a lot of players that there just aren't a ton of them that you would say like, man, that's the perfect guy we need in terms of a starter level guy.
I do wonder, like last year, now Jermaine Johnson transferred in time for spring practice last year and went through spring at Florida State.
Yeah.
Can you imagine a guy like that hitting the portal today?
Mm-hmm.
Where everybody knew he was good. Like, people had recruited him at a community college. But when he signed with Georgia, they knew he was good. That's the one I can, Jordan Addison is an example too, but it seems like that's more targeted, which is part of the issue that we're going to wind up discussing here over the next few weeks. But imagine if it was just a case of a guy like Jermaine Johnson who goes, I want to be an every down player. I can't do that here. I'm open for business. Like, every school in the country would have come after him.
Yeah.
Hard.
I remember last summer, probably close to around this time, Bruce and I were putting together our rankings of the most impactful transfers going into the 21 season. I remember asking you, hey, what you coached the spring game. What do you think of Jermaine Johnson? And you're like, oh, he's their best player on defense. Like,
I saw one warm-up rep and I knew one. Like, he was going against one of their starting offensive tackles, and it was one of those where you just kind of explode out and get your hands into the guy. And I'm like, nope, best player on the team, not even close. Like, that's him.
Well, and those Florida State linemen, they're elite. So you gotta, that helps with the evaluation.
Stop it.
He was ranked 34th in last year's cycle, according to 24/7. And I mean, good for him. Turns into a first rounder, and just saying, I know we can all sit here and say, man, you left Georgia, you could have got a ring and all that. But that's a guy that looked at his situation and said, go somewhere else, get a lot more reps. I could play my way into, being a big time pick.
So this is a good time to pivot this discussion, because I do want to talk about this before we go. The draft wrapped up on Saturday. As usual, the SEC had the most draft picks, but almost half of the SEC's draft picks came from Georgia and LSU. And the Georgia thing's not surprising. They set a record with 15 guys drafted. The LSU thing, they've been bad the last 2 years, but they still had some pretty good players.
Still got some players. Yeah. It does help clarify a little bit that maybe, maybe some of the coordinator hires maybe weren't ideal over the last 2 years there. But yeah, certainly still a ton of respect for LSU. And the Georgia thing blew I mean, you expect it, like, these guys are getting picked and stuff, but it still blew my mind. You go look at their 2018 recruiting class, which was number 1 in the country at the time. It was number 1 in the re-rank we did a couple months ago. Obviously super loaded, but when you take the players in that plus Justin Fields and Cade Mays, they had 14 guys in one recruiting class get drafted already.
Yeah, it is. It's astounding. And, wasn't Tyson Campbell was also in that class, right?
Yep.
And he went number 32.
Ojolari and some guys.
Or guys
33.
Yeah. Golly, it is crazy. And they're going to have more. I mean, Jalen Carter, probably a first round pick next year. I know you're going to hear like 200
Nolan Smith's
guys
already getting that hype. Yeah.
Yeah. See, Nolan Smith hasn't produced that way yet. So that one, I got to see it. But like Jalen Carter, I believe it immediately. Like, if Jalen Carter is not a top 10 pick, I'll be shocked. So, and I realize that we're going to probably give you 200 names of people we say are locks for first round picks. Like, weren't we talking about Jalen Weidermeyer as a potential first round pick this time last year? Didn't even get drafted.
It's hard to get drafted. You look at the undrafted list, and I don't judge those kids for making their moves or whatever, but like, man, there's some like big names that we talk about a lot over the course of a college football season that just don't get picked. It's crazy. I mean, you do appreciate part of that is in those late rounds, they're looking for some of those, lower level gems and stuff like that. But man, there's some really good players that didn't get picked yesterday.
Well, hey, our guy Brock Purdy, the least irrelevant Mr. Irrelevant of all time. Although,
that's right.
I guess Ryan Suckup is the most successful Mr. Irrelevant.
Is he? Is that the gold standard?
I think so. I mean, he's a starting kicker on a Super Bowl team, a Super Bowl winning team. So
you went and watched Brock train. You feel like he's got a shot to stick around?
I think Brock will be in the league for a few years. I think he's going to get paid by NFL teams to be a backup, and he's a smart guy, and you know how he works. Like, yeah. I think he may. I don't know that he's going to be able to do the Chase Daniel model, which, I mean, Chase Daniel is going to craft like an 18-year NFL career for himself. Basically, from what I was told, the way Chase Daniel does it is he gets on a roster and he figures out what the starter likes and wants and says, how can I make your life easier? What can I do in the meeting room, on the practice field to make your life easier? And
I
then
thought you meant like you bringing him coffee and stuff. Like
not like that. Just like, I can break this down for you so you can see it easier, or I can, if there's a drill you want me to run that you hate running, I can, and basically you get the most powerful person in the organization to be your biggest advocate, which is,
I like that.
Pretty smart.
That's very smart.
Yeah. So
you make yourself invaluable.
Exactly. So the Big Ten, only 5 fewer than the SEC. And I do wonder, as the Big Ten, money wise, they're already probably a little above the SEC, and it depends on the school, because obviously a lot of the SEC schools sell a lot of tickets, get a lot of donations. So not individually every school ahead of the SEC just because the conference wide one is, but I do think there may be a year at some point where the Big Ten surpasses the SEC in draft picks.
That's interesting.
Well, per capita. Because the SEC is obviously bringing in 2 more teams
on a per school basis.
Yeah.
You mean? Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's possible. I don't know that it wouldn't be an every year thing, but I do think it's going to be possible that happens. The Big 12 with 25, which that they had no first rounders. They came back. I still have this, and you've heard me say this on the podcast a couple of times, Max. I think when Texas and Oklahoma get to the SEC, they're going to be able to draft better, or to recruit better linemen. Because I think linemen don't want to play in the Big 12. Nick Bonito was the first Big 12 lineman to go. And, that was deep into the second round. So I think that's going to change for them. Texas thing,
there's just a transfer commitment. It's just how this goes,
Oh yeah. Are we allowed to release it yet?
Minnesota running back Marquise Bucky Irving.
Really
good player. He's in our best available top 10. Has committed to Oregon.
Ooh, well, replacing Travis Dye, who's gone to USC.
Where did he go? Yeah,
not a lineman. Also, not a lineman.
I turned on the. I did watch the. Did you watch a lot of spring games? This. It's okay if you didn't. We're busy.
I did. Now. Oh, yeah. I said Nick Bonito deep in the second round. By the way, not deep in the second round. Oh, yeah, no, he was the 32nd pick of the second round. I saw pick 32. I was like, oh, never mind. He was early. No, he was very deep in the second round.
Yeah, that's right. Okay. I was going to say I watched the USC. I did watch the USC spring game.
I did too.
Or at least the first half of it. And it was funny on the play-by-play of it. It really was like transfer, fakes the handoff to transfer, throws to transfer, tackled by transfer.
Yeah.
And I'm excited to see how it all fits together this year. Do you think if they add Addison, are you that there's going to be people being like, oh shit, that's a playoff team now. Are you there yet? Or do you feel like let's give them a year?
Again, nobody wearing a 50, 60 or 70 number that they're yanking out, unless they do, the week is young. So perhaps they do, but That's my problem there. 50s, 60s, 70s, and 90s. Like, where are those guys? So, because I mean, I want them to beef up their D line too. That's been an issue as well. They had a first. Remember, the first receiver taken in this draft played for USC. Like,
he did. Freak show.
Good receivers have not been their problem. Michael Pittman Jr. played for USC. Like, they have had good receivers.
Yeah. It's, man. Is there a part of this as much as there's all this hand wringing about, the way that this would go down if Jordan Addison goes to USC, and I don't know, maybe if can Narduzzi bully Lincoln Riley into not taking Jordan Addison? I'm not sure he really can.
No, but if Jordan Addison had just said, "Hey, I'm available,"
yeah,
and had 18 teams courting him, I think it would be viewed better than
correct.
this.
Yeah, correct. But if this happens, then I don't know. I suppose we probably do also need to acknowledge, like, Caleb Williams throwing to Jordan Addison would be pretty damn cool to watch.
It would be. It'd be fun. It'd be fun. And
I know it's ruining the sport, but it could also be fun to watch.
It also at a school that has not made the playoff since the playoff has existed.
Mm-hmm.
So
that's true.
Again, I know we're mad about this, but
it's not good for your bet either, is it?
It may. Oh no, I'm not worried about I'm going to win my bet. I am going to win that.
I know psychologically the bet's pretty big for Ari.
Unless they pull a guard, a center, and a tackle out of the portal who are really, really good, who are all conference or award winners.
Yeah.
In the next few days, I'm not worried about my bet. Like, this is 2022 is one safe year, and then I got 23 and 24 to get through.
Okay.
So the Big 12, by the way, 25 players drafted. How many from the University of Texas? Zero.
That'd be a zero. Which I wasn't surprised by. Josh Thompson was probably the only guy that probably had a chance to get.
Dicker the kicker, man.
But Dicker the kicker. Yeah.
UDFA.
Yeah. You know who did well though?
Who's that?
Cincinnati did well. Houston did well. They're going to
put the league
players in the league.
Good for the league. Baylor did really well.
Yes.
Oklahoma as usual. But the Texas thing is interesting to me because a lot of times we wind up getting into the same circular chicken and egg argument about this.
Yeah.
With Texas, we don't have to, because we know Texas has had the highest recruiting rankings of any Big 12 team over the last 10 years.
Right.
It's the chicken.
Yeah.
It ain't the egg's fault. It's the chicken.
Yeah. I think that, there's plenty of data that shows you, the other schools that signed that many 4-star players, 5-star players, what's the rate of turning them into draft picks? It just ain't the same at Texas. And there's a lot of ways to unpeel, that. Yeah, we could go on.
Like
in honor of Ari's wedding, we probably could just talk about Texas for an hour here. That might upset him, but we could.
But I asked Almar Richardson, we had him on a couple weeks ago. He covers that team very closely. Like, what the hell are they doing that they can't fall ass backward into a couple of draft picks?
Yeah. I wrote about that a couple of years ago from covering a Texas Pro Day that was just like, there's just been a bunch of years these where you go to them and you're just like, this is not really a big event. Like, there's not all these head coaches coming in and stuff. And I remember asking, I think I asked John Bianco or somebody, like, when do you think this is going to be like a big deal again? And I think he said, like, well, probably like when Sam Ehlinger's, going pro, then it will be. And I think, but that may have been the year with the pandemic screwed it up, right? Or no?
Ehlinger was
he had a regular
draft was last year.
Yeah, he had a regular one. So, I guess the answer you could again look forward and say, okay, well, next year when Bijan goes pro, then that pro day will be a big deal. But man, there's just turning really good players into even mid-round picks is like one of those steps that Texas just has to take at some point to become relevant again, or to become consistently irrelevant.
That would be maddening for me if I was a Texas fan.
Yeah.
Maddening. Like, because Charlie Strong made draft picks at Louisville, but then couldn't make them at Texas.
And the weird thing is too, there's kind of a perception thing with this as well. I think that goes with it, because it's a weird compliment to give, but it's true. Texas has had a lot of undrafted guys actually make it in the league and make it for quite a while in the league too.
Right. Ford's one of my favorite players.
For
period.
For sure.
Like, couldn't believe he didn't get drafted.
There's probably an NFL perception of this too that thinks like, don't draft these Texas guys, and then they end up making it longer in the league than you'd think they would. So it's not necessarily that the talent is awful, but there's clearly a couple things wrong there in the development piece.
Yeah, that's what they got to get fixed. I wrote about it last year where I just put the numbers up of the guys they put in the draft versus Oklahoma. Oklahoma had doubled them up over a 10-year period, and Alabama and Ohio State had tripled them up over a 10-year period. Like, there's no, why Jeff Okuda is leaving the state to go to Ohio State. It's not, why Jackson Smith and Jig was going to Ohio State.
Right.
Why would you go there?
Yeah. No, it's true. That when you're not getting guys drafted, then it just keeps kind of this nasty cycle from it just keeps going where, of course these guys leave the state or go to A&M or whatever, because they know, well, Texas isn't getting guys drafted. And I'm sure that has factored, Garrett Wilson and all these guys, I'm sure it's factored into their decision for a long time that, I remember him even saying that when he was a recruit that, man, I know a lot of guys that went to Texas and didn't get anywhere.
Yeah. It's just, I feel bad at this point for Texas fans, because that's a piece of information that can be so weaponized in recruiting that it is, and there's nothing you can say or do about it other than maybe next year produce some draft picks.
Right. No, yeah, you can always sell the hope that, hey, we're just a couple pieces away from maybe, making a run at the conference title and maybe being a playoff. You're always selling that at Texas, whether it's a new coach that's 1 year in or 3 years in or just got hired. But the draft thing it's hard to spin.
Yeah. I don't know what you do. I feel bad for Steve Sarkisian, who walked into that situation and now must fix it. Now he's getting paid handsomely to do it, so go do it. But that's the problem right now. And you kind of wonder now are the players they're getting, even though the recruiting ranking is fairly high, are they getting the ones the Alabamas and the Ohio States just sort of like, we don't really want you anyway?
Hey, this is one of the things that I know. I'm not disputing that stars matter and that, recruiting great classes is super, super important to staying relevant. But one of the underrated traits of good programs, Andy, can you take the people you've got and get as much as you possibly can out of them? And there's some schools that just aren't very good at that.
Yeah. Well, we're going to have to see what they do, because this is bordering on epidemic at Texas. Like, a 0 here is bad. And like, now Bijan's a running back. He's got otherworldly talent, but running backs are not valued the way they were. So
he may not be his fault if he's not a first rounder.
Right.
Certainly.
Exactly.
We saw that with Breece Hall this year.
Yeah. I mean, Xavier Worthy 2 years from now could be a first round type talent. And he does play a position they value, but you got to get him there. So get them there, because if you don't, when you get in the SEC and you got LSU that's sitting there at 500, getting like 94 guys drafted, it's going to be a long season.
Right. This goes back to something we've talked about before with the collectives topic is, you can, if the people who have the most money, can go out and get the best players.
That's true.
You still gotta do something with them.
But you also have to target the right players. So
you do.
Listen, we'll see what happens to Jordan Addison. You may have heard something at the beginning of this show. If there's further information on Jordan Addison that we can provide before
he's not in the portal at the end of this podcast. I'm pretty sure he'll probably be in the portal by the time you hear this. Yeah.
Yes. So we'll let you know on that. But again, until I see some 50, 60, and 70 numbers, you got to be able to pick them too. That hadn't changed. So we'll see how it goes. But thank you for listening. Max, I will see you in lovely Arizona. There'll be a cactus with us the next time we see each other.
Beautiful.
And we'll probably be talking about this a lot this week. So expect your Portal Authority Max Olson to be a frequent guest. We'll talk to you soon.
All right.